I don't remember the first word she said to me. But I remember the way the room changed when she walked in, like someone had turned down the noise, dimmed the lights, and left only her. She wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. Her presence had weight, the kind that pulled at me before I even understood why. A woman in her 40s, too elegant to be careless, too tired to bother pretending. Her confidence wasn't the polished kind you see in movies. It was lived in, like an old leather jacket that had survived storms. There were lines at the corners of her mouth, but when she half smiled, I caught myself holding my breath. I must have looked obvious. Because she tilted her head, not asking anything, not giving anything away, just seeing me. We were sitting across from each other at a table that felt too small for how much space she occupied in my chest. Coffee had gone cold between us, untouched. Her hand rested near mine, just close enough to notice the pale veins beneath her skin, the faint scar on her knuckle. My fingers twitched, wanting to close the gap, but I didn't. "You're quiet," she said at last. Her voice, low, steady, a little rough at the edges, cut through the silence. "Maybe I don't have much to say," I answered, though the truth was, I had too much. Too many words, too many thoughts I couldn't risk spilling. She leaned back, crossing one leg over the other, and the faint scrape of her heel against the floor made me tense. Not from discomfort, more like the sound reminded me she was real, sitting here, close enough to touch. "You look like you're thinking too hard," she said. "Maybe." I smiled, small, uneven. The air between us was charged in a way that made it hard to sit still. Her perfume, subtle, something floral but grounded, seeped into me until I couldn't tell if it was on her skin or already caught inside mine. I tried not to stare. But my eyes kept slipping, her throat, the curve of her wrist, the way her lips parted just slightly when she exhaled. Every detail was an anchor, and I was sinking fast. When her hand brushed mine, it wasn't deliberate. At least, it didn't seem that way. But the faint press of her skin against my knuckles was enough to undo me. I froze, not daring to move. She didn't pull back. Instead, she let the silence stretch, like she wanted to see what I would do with it. "I shouldn't," she murmured, almost too softly for me to catch. The words slipped out like something she hadn't meant to say aloud. I leaned in just a little, my voice low. "Shouldn't what?" Her eyes flicked to mine. Held there. And in that look, I felt the tug of something unspoken, regret, hesitation, desire tangled into one impossible knot. She wet her lip with her tongue, an unconscious gesture that made my pulse jump. "You're addictive," she whispered finally. The words hit harder than they should have. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to keep steady. "Then don't try quitting me," I said, surprising even myself with how firm, how certain it came out. The moment cracked open between us, wider, sharper. Her breath caught, and I thought, for a second, she might lean closer. But then, the door behind us swung open. We both turned, too quickly, as footsteps entered the room. The spell broke. But not completely. Because her hand was still against mine. And neither of us moved it. The footsteps faded, but the interruption left its mark. She slid her hand back slowly, as if nothing had happened, though her fingers lingered just a heartbeat longer than they needed to. I pretended not to notice. Or maybe I failed at pretending. My hand still tingled where hers had been. She straightened, brushed an invisible crease from her skirt. "You shouldn't say things like that," she said, her tone calm but her eyes unsettled. "Like what?" "That you're not someone to quit." She avoided my gaze when she said it, choosing instead to adjust her earring, a small gold hoop that caught the light. "You don't believe me?" I asked quietly. Her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "I believe you're young enough to think you mean it." The words landed heavier than she intended. I could tell by the way she winced, as if she regretted them the second they left her lips. I leaned back, studying her. She was trying to build a wall between us, brick by careful brick. But her voice, her eyes, they betrayed her. There were things about her I didn't know, yet felt in the silences. A marriage that had ended badly, maybe, Years of being the strong one, the one who didn't crumble. Loneliness tucked neatly under confidence. And me, I was supposed to be the opposite, reckless, too green to understand consequences. But she didn't see how I carried my own quiet weight. Nights of lying awake, wondering if I'd ever be enough for someone. Wondering if I'd always be the one reaching instead of being reached for. She leaned forward then, elbows on the table, her perfume spilling toward me again. The nearness felt deliberate this time. Her eyes softened, scanning my face as though searching for proof I wasn't just infatuated. "You don't know what you're asking for," she murmured. Her voice brushed against me almost the way her breath did, close enough to stir something deep in my chest. "Maybe not," I admitted. "But I know what I want." That earned me a silence. Heavy, charged. Her hand rose, almost absently, and touched my shoulder. Just fingertips, feather light. The gesture lasted too long to be casual, but not long enough to be safe. I tried not to react, but every nerve in me leaned toward her. She pulled back abruptly, exhaling a laugh that wasn't quite laughter. "This is dangerous," she said, shaking her head. I tilted mine. "For you or for me?" Her eyes lifted, locking onto mine. For the first time, she didn't look away. "Both." The word hung there, fragile and final, yet not final at all. I didn't reach for her hand this time. I didn't need to. The bond had already shifted, invisible but undeniable, woven into the pauses, the touches we didn't name, the confessions hidden inside half-smiles. When we finally stood, either of us moved toward the door right away. We lingered in that charged space, too close, too aware. And when she brushed past me, her shoulder grazing mine, I felt it again, not an ending. A beginning, sharpened by restraint. The cafe had emptied out, leaving only the hum of the refrigerator in the back and the faint clink of dishes being stacked somewhere behind the counter. We should have left by now. Instead, we lingered, she with her half-drunk cup of coffee, me pretending to scroll through my phone while stealing glances. She caught me looking once, and I froze. But instead of calling me out, she just tilted her head, her lips curving in the faintest acknowledgement, like she was used to being seen yet never quite believed it. I wanted to say something, anything. But then her phone lit up on the table between us. A message. A name I didn't recognize. She flipped the phone face down quickly, almost too quickly. I raised an eyebrow. "Someone important?" Her breath hitched. "Not really." The answer was sharp, practiced. But her fingers tapped against the phone, restless. Before I could push, the cafe door swung open. A friend of hers, someone older, familiar in a way I couldn't place, walked in, scanning the room. My stomach dropped. She reacted instantly, shifting her chair just enough to widen the distance between us, sliding her hand away from where it had been resting dangerously near mine. Her voice changed too, lighter, casual. "Long day," she said to me, too loudly, too bright. "I should head out soon." The friend waved, started toward us. I forced a smile, my chest tightening at the sudden space between us. My fingers itched with the absence of hers. After a quick, polite exchange, her friend left with a to-go order, never questioning. But the damage was done. The air between us was full of what we hadn't said. When the door shut again, she exhaled shakily. Her hands pressed flat against the table, as if steadying herself. "This is exactly why," she trailed off. "Why what?" I pressed. She looked at me then, really looked. Her eyes glossy, guarded. "Why this can't, should never." Her words faltered, tangled in the silence that followed. I leaned forward, slowly, deliberately, until the space between us was thinner than a breath. My pulse drummed in my throat. Her lips parted, not in invitation, but in something between warning and surrender. The world narrowed to her, her perfume, her warmth, the faint tremor of her hand as it brushed against mine under the table. She didn't move away this time. "Do you want me to stop?" I whispered. Her eyes flicked to my mouth, then back to my eyes. She didn't answer. The silence was louder than any confession. I closed the last inch, not enough for a kiss, just enough that my forehead almost touched hers. Her breath mingled with mine, hot and uneven. And then, her phone buzzed again, vibrating against the table like an accusation. She flinched, pulling back slightly, though her hand stayed tangled with mine beneath the wood. We both sat there, caught, half in restraint, half in a gravity we couldn't undo. Neither of us kissed. Neither of us let go. The second time her phone buzzed, she didn't even look. She silenced it with a flick of her thumb, eyes fixed on me as if the device no longer mattered. Her hand was still against mine, hidden beneath the table. Neither of us acknowledged it, but the heat of her palm made it impossible to think about anything else. Finally, she whispered, "This is wrong." "Then why are you still here?" The words slipped out sharper than I meant, but I didn't take them back. Her breath caught, her lips parting. She leaned back slightly, as if distance might dilute the truth. But her shoulders stayed angled toward me, betraying her. "Because I don't trust myself to leave," she admitted, her voice raw. Something inside me cracked open. I reached across, slow enough to give her every chance to stop me, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. My knuckles skimmed her cheek, softer than I expected, and she closed her eyes at the touch. "Don't," she breathed, but it wasn't resistance, it was plea. I leaned closer, my voice low near her ear. "Tell me you don't want this, and I'll stop." Her silence was answer enough. The space between us collapsed. She leaned into me, her temple brushing my jaw, the faint tremor of her shoulders betraying what her words refused to. My arms slid around her without thought, steadying her, pulling her closer until I could feel the rise and fall of her chest against mine. For a moment, it was just us, the muted hum of the cafe, the warmth of her pressed into me, the faint scent of her perfume clinging to my shirt. Then she stiffened. "They'll judge us," she whispered, almost like a confession. "My friends. My family. Yours." "I don't care," I said, and I meant it. My voice sounded rough, urgent. "You will." Her eyes opened, locking onto mine with something between longing and warning. "You're young enough to survive the shame." "I'm not." The word stung, but I refused to retreat. Instead, I cupped her face gently, my thumb brushing her jaw. Her skin was warm, flushed, alive beneath my touch. Her eyes flicked to my lips, just for a second, but enough to undo me. I leaned in, slow, deliberate. She didn't pull away. Our breaths tangled, ragged and uneven. My heart hammered against my ribs. Her fingers curled into the fabric of my sleeve, anchoring me. We were there, suspended on the edge of something irreversible. And then, her phone lit up again, not buzzing this time, just glowing with a name across the screen. A man's name. Her gaze flicked down, then back up at me. She didn't move. Neither did I. Her lips hovered a breath away, her voice breaking the stillness in a whisper that cut deeper than any kiss. "Say it. Tell me what you really want." Her phone screen glowed between us, that name burning like a wound I wasn't supposed to see. She didn't move to hide it this time. She let me look. "He's not," she started, but stopped. The unfinished sentence was louder than anything she could have said. I leaned back, my pulse unsteady. "Not what?" Her throat worked as she swallowed. She turned the phone face down again, slower this time, deliberate. "Not who you think," she murmured. "Then who?" Her silence stretched. She shifted in her chair, shoulders tight, fingers twisting the band on her right hand. It wasn't a wedding ring, not anymore, but it was something. A trace. Finally, she said it. "My ex-husband." The words landed like a crack of thunder in a quiet room. I froze, unable to mask the jolt in my chest. She saw it. She always saw too much. "He still calls," she continued, her voice flat but her hands betraying her, fingers trembling as they smoothed over the table's edge. "Not because he cares. Because he wants to remind me he still exists. That I don't get to forget." I exhaled sharply, leaning forward. "And you answer?" Her eyes snapped to mine, sharp, defensive. Then softened. "Sometimes." Not because I want to. Because I'm weak. She pulled back then, rising from her chair as if the confession had made sitting unbearable. I stood too, instinctively too close. Our bodies brushed in the narrow space between table and wall. The contact was brief but searing, her shoulder grazing my chest, the faint brush of her hair against my jaw. She froze, every muscle taut, as if even that accidental closeness was too much. I shouldn't be here, she whispered. Her voice shook in a way I hadn't heard before, stripped of the confidence she wore like armor. I caught her wrist before she could retreat. Not hard, just enough to stop her. Her pulse fluttered beneath my fingers, frantic. You're not weak, I said quietly. You're surviving. Her eyes shimmered, glassy but unbroken. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then she stepped closer, the decision reckless and certain at once, until I could feel her breath ghosting over my neck. You have no idea what you're risking, she murmured, though her body betrayed her words, her hand lifted, hovering near my chest, as if pulled by something she couldn't fight. I leaned down, my forehead almost against hers, the air between us fevered and thin. Then tell me to stop. Her lips trembled, parted, but the words never came. Instead, she pressed her palm flat against my chest, right over my heartbeat. It was the closest we'd ever been, more intimate than a kiss, more dangerous too. And then, with a shuddering breath, she whispered the only truth that mattered. I can't. Her palm was still pressed against my chest, trembling faintly with the rhythm of my heartbeat. The space between us was gone, replaced by something heavier, hotter, an inevitability we'd been circling for too long. She looked up at me, eyes glossy, torn between surrender and flight. We can't. She started, but her voice faltered, thinned into silence. I lowered my head just enough that my lips hovered near her ear. Then tell me to walk away. Her breath shuddered out, warm against my neck. She didn't speak. The world seemed to hold itself still, the dim light above us, the muted clink of dishes from the back room, the faint hum of the fridge. Everything faded until only her remained, close enough to undo me with a single word. You don't understand, she whispered. If I fall into this, there's no way back. Then don't fall, I murmured. Choose it. Her body swayed closer, unintentional, magnetic. The brush of her hip against mine sent a shock through me. She caught herself, half a step too late, but her hand stayed against my chest, now gripping the fabric of my shirt. The air was thick with restraint stretched to its breaking point. People will talk, she said, voice small now, almost a confession. About my age. About yours. About how desperate it must look. I lifted a hand and cupped her face gently, my thumb grazing the soft line of her jaw. She leaned into the touch without meaning to, her eyes fluttering closed for a beat. Let them talk, I said. They don't see what I see. Her eyes snapped open again, sharp, searching, like she was testing me for cracks. But whatever she found there unraveled her composure. She stepped into me fully, her forehead resting against mine, her breath uneven. This is reckless, she whispered, though her fingers curled tighter into my shirt. Yeah, I said, my own voice low, steady. So is wanting something this much. For a moment, we just breathed each other in, foreheads touching, lips almost brushing, the kind of closeness that burned more than distance ever could. Then, finally, the last wall gave way. Her hand slid up, around the back of my neck, pulling me closer. My lips met hers in a kiss that wasn't polished or careful. It was messy, trembling, raw. The kind that carried every no we'd tried to say, every silence we'd endured. When she pulled back, it wasn't far. Her eyes were damp, her lips parted, but there was no more hesitation in her face. You're impossible, she whispered, almost smiling. Then don't try quitting me, I answered softly, repeating the words that had started it all. And this time, she didn't pull away. This time, we understood each other completely. The kiss left us both unsteady, like we just stepped off a moving train. We stood there, close, not speaking, our foreheads still leaning into each other, as if either of us trusted the air between us anymore. Her hand slid from my shirt down to my fingers, hesitating there before lacing with mine. That single gesture was more grounding than anything else. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "Do you know how dangerous this is for me?" I nodded. "Yeah." I squeezed her hand gently. "And I'm not walking away." A laugh caught in her throat, half disbelieving, half relieved. She leaned into me then, resting her head against my shoulder, and for a long time we didn't move. Just stood in that small cafe, the world dimmed, her body warm against mine, our breaths slowly falling into rhythm. She pulled back eventually, her eyes glassy but steady. "People will never understand this." "Maybe not," I admitted. "But they don't have to." "We do." That earned me a silence, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful. Her gaze softened in a way that made my chest ache, like she was allowing herself, for the first time, to stop running from the what if. I brushed a strand of hair from her face, tucking it gently behind her ear. My thumb lingered at her temple, and she leaned into the touch. "Not hiding. Not pretending." "You make it sound so simple," she whispered. "Maybe it is," I said. "Simple doesn't mean easy." Her lips curved into the faintest smile, worn, vulnerable, but real. She stepped in closer again, and this time there was no hesitation. My arms wrapped around her, holding her fully, and she melted into the embrace as though she'd been waiting far too long for someone to hold her without condition. The cafe around us didn't matter anymore. The age gap, the whispers, the doubts, they were still there, but smaller now, dwarfed by the fact that neither of us had moved when we could have. Her hand gripped the back of my shirt, firm, as if to anchor herself. And in that grip, I felt the truth of it, she wasn't letting go. When she finally tilted her face up toward me, she didn't need words. I kissed her forehead slowly, deliberately, a promise wrapped in something quieter than desire. Something steadier. She exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and surrender. "We'll figure it out," she murmured. "We already are," I said. We stood there until the cafe lights dimmed, until the world outside reminded us time hadn't stopped. But it felt like it had, just long enough for us to find each other. And this time, neither of us stepped back.